Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church, Sunday School Department Ladies Class. And we are winding up our study of Exodus today. We are in chapters 38, 39, and 40, hoping to finish up this study. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Okay, in chapter 38, Moses has come down from his second trip up the mountain, his 40-night camp out with the Lord at the top of Mount Zion. And he has already given the plans for the tabernacle. And he is bringing more with him down the mountain. And he's bringing with him the second set of the Ten Commandments. He is also appointing, per God's instruction, Bezalel and Aholiab as chief craftsmen to be the job coordinators, the contractors, if you will, of building the tabernacle. And now we're hearing in chapter 38 and 39 how Bezalel and Aholiab have done the project. And so we will begin with that. In verse 1 of 38, 1 through 7, they're talking about the altar of the burnt offering. If you'll remember, as you go into the courtyard, you go through the curtain into the courtyard, the very first thing you see is a great big square bronze altar. And that is where the sacrifices, the burnt sacrifices were made. And that's what we're talking about in those first 7 verses, is the preparation of that. And then we go to the basin for washing. That's the laver. The laver sits between the burnt offering altar, the bronze altar, and the holy place. And it's right in front of the curtain that goes into the holy place in the tabernacle. And it is made of bronze, but we find out something new in this verse that we haven't known before. In verse 8 it states, he made the laver of bronze and its base of bronze, and from the bronze mirrors of the serving women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. These mirrors are something that only very high up, wealthy women would have. Now, if you'll remember when they were in Egypt, the Lord impressed every Egyptian there. Give the Hebrew children all of your goods. He wanted them to. Payment for 400 years of slavery. And also he knew what he was going to use those materials for. Can you see that one of these women going up to her Egyptian neighbor, or maybe the woman across the street, down the street, around the bend, and saying, "Oh, I love your beautiful mirror." And the Egyptian lady says, "Here, take it." That was the impression that God put on their minds. So these women that they're talking about, I laughed and told my class this morning, I said, this is their kitchen committee, if you will. This is a group of women. It says they met the mirrors of the serving women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. They met there where the men would be working, the artisans would be working, and it's not just men only, but where the artisans were working on the tabernacle. And their gift, their thing to serve, was perhaps carrying them water, bringing them supplies, bringing them food product, whatever. They were there to serve, to fill in and do. I'm not an artisan, so maybe that is one way that I can help with the building of the tabernacle. It's just to make sure every day at lunchtime you get fed. That's what these women were. Now this position altered. As you go into Leviticus, you'll find it's not as such a nice, pleasant connotation to be one of these women. That role evolved, but for now, that's what it is. And it's a very positive thing. Tradition, Jewish tradition has it that Moses didn't want to accept these mirrors. And he categorically refused them. Put his hands up and said, "No, I'm not going to take those." Something that was used for vanity. He didn't see possibly how it could be used to the Lord. But tradition continues on that the Lord said, "Oh, yes, you will." These women have been in bondage just the same as their men have been. They suffered along with the men. They have supported their families and their men on this trek so far to this mountain. They are very much a part of this, and I want them to have a part in the tabernacle. You will take the mirrors. So I love that he told them, he said, we'll take the mirrors. In fact, we'll make the laver out of it. The bowl that held water, and this very, very reflective surface underneath the water. How beautiful would that have been? It would reflect the blue of the sky above, because it wasn't just a little bowl. This was a pretty good size container, although we're not told its size. It's the only implement in the tabernacle that we're not told the size of it. Now Solomon, when he built his temple, his laver held 10,000 gallons of water. Pretty impressive, huh? Then we talk about the courtyard. Bezalel got all of the wood together, all of the hangings together, all of the bronze sockets together. He got the ones that to do in the tabernacle itself that were of gold. He got all of this stuff together, all the hangings together, all of the things that were to be embroidered, all the pegs to drive down into the ground to hold these wooden walls up, and the cording. He got everything together to build that wall around the tabernacle, the courtyard, if you will. All right, the materials used, the inventory for the tabernacle of testimony, the tabernacle of the testimony. What is this testimony that they're talking about? We see that several times, and it talks about the tabernacle of the testimony. What is the testimony? The testimony is the tablets with the 10 commandments. It's the ark that contains the 10 commandments. The ark that contains the way to be pleasing to God. All right. So, Moses, he's getting everything ready, and he has turned over the counting of everything needed over to one of the sons of Aaron. This is Ishmael. Okay, and then they start counting up how much gold and how much silver, how much bronze is used. All of these measures are used. We've went over shekels and we've went over talents, but there's a new one in here that we had not learned. In verse 26 it says a beka. A beka is half a shekel. I thought that was interesting. If you'll remember, when the Lord told Moses up on top of the mountain, I think it was the first time he went up, that he would appoint a time when he wanted his people numbered, and they were not to be numbered unless he instigated it. And when he numbered it, every man that was 20 or older would pay half a shekel. And if I was 19 and a half and I turned 20 soon thereafter, I was supposed to take my half shekel to the priest. This is where the temple tax got its start. So there's another number, another weight, if you will, that we came to. And we find in verse 26, they did do a count. They came up with 603,550 men. To be counted in this count, you were 20 years old or older, you were male. I asked my class, do you have any idea how I came up with, or how others have come up with it? There was approximately 2.5 to 3 million people during this time. I said, well, here's one way that it was figured out. 603,550. Let's just round that off to 600,000 men over 20. And let's say they were married. Each one of them had a wife. That'd be another 600,000. That brings you up to 12,000. 1,200,000. And then each family had 3 kids. Those 3 kids being less than 20 years old. That brings you up to a little over 3 million people right there. We know that families were highly encouraged to have multiple children in this age, in this time of life. And some of those families may have had 1 child. Some of these families may have had a dozen. So you don't really know. But that's a good estimate. That's where we come up with close to 3 million people, or 3 million people, 2.5 to 3 million people that were there. The weight of gold, one commentary that I looked at, he said that if you figured it up in today's weight, excuse me while I look for a piece of paper, he said that it was around 2,000 pounds, which would be a ton in our weights and measures of this day and time. And can you imagine how much a ton of gold would be today? And that's not counting the silver and the bronze and all the precious stones that they had. It was amazing how much in inventory this was. And that ended chapter 39. Okay, let's go to chapter 38. Let's go to 39. 39 talks about first how they're going to come up with the priestly garments. And verse 1 says, of the blue, purple, and scarlet thread they made garments of ministry, for ministering in the holy place, and made the holy garments for Aaron, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The following pieces that we're going to talk about are those pieces we've already discussed before that the high priest wore. The ephod. In verses 2 through 7, he talked about the ephod. And who wore that ephod? Do you remember? I just gave you the answer. The high priest. The ephod was like an apron. One of those, my mom used to have one. It was as long in the back as it was in the front, and it just slipped on over your head. It was kind of like a big rectangle with a hole in the center of it for your head to go through. Then they had the breast piece. Well, the breast piece is talked about from verse 8 all the way down to verse 20. The breast piece was very artistic, and it was woven, and great designs on it was embroidered on it. A real piece of workmanship in gold and purple and scarlet thread and fine woven linen. They made the breastplate. If you remember, it was a rectangle piece of cloth that they doubled and then turned up and made kind of like a pocket that you went in from the sides for the pocket. Kind of like some of our sweatshirts are now, only it would have been sitting center chest when it was in place. And they set 4 rows of stones. There was 4 rows of 3 stones apiece that went ahead. Our scripture tells us the names, a King James Version tells us the names of each stone, but know up front that even the Jews, looking back at their historical papers, say that they're not really sure what stones those were. These are what they think they were, because the language changes and things move in descriptives. But we think there was, to give you an idea, beryl and onyx and jasper and turquoise and sapphire and diamond, amethyst. Would have been a beautiful sparkly thing. And then each stone was polished, and on that polished stone, an engraver, another talent, an engraver would come, and he would write the name of the tribe. What is the name of the tribe? The name of the tribe is the 12 the sons of Jacob. Almost. The 12 sons of Jacob was Reuben and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. But if you'll look at that list that I just read off to you, if you'll remember, Joseph is one of the sons, but there's not a tribe of Joseph. Why not? Because Joseph didn't need any of the spoils that they were going to get, and he wasn't there. He wasn't going to be there, but his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, they took his share. And because he had the honor and the privilege of being assigned as a birthright, of receiving the birthright, he got 2 parts. So that's why instead of having a tribe of Joseph, you have a tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim. Wait a minute, that makes 13. Where did one fall out? Why did one fall out? Well, if you'll remember, Levi. The tribe of Levi was set apart as being the priest, and they would be in every tribe. They would not just be in one little place, and they had specific duties. They belonged to the Lord, so they weren't in that tribe. So their stone, their name would not have been on the ephod, which I think is the continuity of what God is doing with these people is amazing. Once you see how he rolls through here with this. Holding the breastplate together was chains that was buckled to another signet up here, and on each one it had the name of 6 tribes on one shoulder and the name of 6 tribes on the other. It was held together with chains, and then there was a sash that went around it to secure it to the chest. You didn't want to be bending over and have that flop out, so it had to be brought up close to the body and held close to the body, so that's what it was. Then the other priestly garments. Other priestly garments were the head priest, the high priest, also wore this garment under his ephod, but it was a woven. The high priest was of blue, and the rest of them were of white. And the high priest, on the bottom of his, he had a roll. Remember how you heard the bells when the high priest was doing his job in the Holy of Holies, in the holy place and in the Holy of Holies? Had a pomegranate, a knitted crochet tapestry. I don't know how it was constructed, but it was a cloth resembling a pomegranate, and then a bell, and then a pomegranate, and then a bell, and then a pomegranate and a bell, all the way around the hem. So when he moved, you heard that tinkle, tinkle, tinkle of the bells. You knew that what he was doing. Then the last garment accessory that they made was they had made a turban for the high priest to wear, and on the turban would have been a gold placket that reached from temple to temple, and it said on it, "Holiness to the Lord," and it had a blue cording that was attached to each side. The cording was brought back behind the turban and tied there to hold it in place. And he wore that. How many times did he wear that in a year? One time. And then the high priest did that. Okay, Bezalel and the rest of the artisans have now got everything ready for the tabernacle. It's all built. It's all in one place. It is not set up, but it's all there and ready. And so in verse 32, they call Moses, and they want Moses to come and inspect. I can't see Moses not being in and among them as they were constructing, as they were fashioning all of this, all the way through this. But now that it's done, Bezalel wants to get Moses to sign off on it. So Moses comes and looks. Now we're talking about this 81-year-old man, and he is seeing something come to life that the Lord had placed a vision of it in his head. Can you see him in your mind's eye? There is this area, I don't know if it was under a tent or where, Bezalel had everything. I can see him walking on one side and the other fellow walking on his other side, and said, "Moses, this is the bronze altar." Can you see Moses walk up to the bronze altar and maybe run his hand across the top of it and look at it intently and walk all the way around this 7.5-foot square altar, checking everything and looking at it, and then nodding his head, and then going on maybe to the laver and seeing the beauty of this reflective, shining, polished brass laver? Do you see him checking the height? Yes, that's just right. This is just right. Do you see him inspecting the curtains? Do you see him inspecting the covers that are going to be over the tabernacle? maybe rubbing his hand down or fingering the ornate tapestry, the embroidery that's there. He checks all the utensils. And when he looks at it all, he goes to the garments of the ministry. And the last thing he looks at is that. And he looked over all the work. And he accepted the work as worship of the people. And indeed they had done it as the Lord had commanded. That's verse 43. Just so they had done it. And Moses blessed them. Do you see the tears in the old man's eyes? Do you see the relief in Bezalel? Exodus 40. They're going to set it up now. The Lord spoke to Moses and he gives him the time for when. He says, Moses, on the first day of the new year, remember at Passover, God changed that. We're now into the month he called Nisan, first month of the new year. They're on a lunar schedule. God set them up to do a lunar schedule. One of the reasons he did, we think, is because all of the people around them, the heathen, the idol worshipers, most of them worship some form of a sun god. He didn't want his people anywhere near that. So they followed the lunar year. The lunar year, the reflection of the sun. The lunar has no, the Hebrews, you and I, we have no light of our own. The only light we can have is the reflected light of God. That's what he wants his people to be and to show. So he sets it up about when he wants it. And he tells him the order that he wants them to put the thing together. He tells them to bring the Ark of the Testimony in, the Ark holding the 10 Commandments in, to put it in place, then to erect the tent over the top of it, and how to put that all together, and then how to put the curtain between the holy place and the Holy of Holies, and the items that should be in the holy place, and then the curtain separating it from the courtyard, and then the things in the courtyard, and then the courtyard curtain to separate it all off from the populace, from the tent city of the rest of the 3 million people that were encamped around where the tabernacle would be. And he said, I want you to bring Aaron and his sons to the door, the courtyard door, and we're going to anoint them. And he gives him the idea. We've talked about this 3-4 weeks ago, and what they're going to do. After you've cleansed them, then they will put on the garments. Then they will be anointed. It is just amazing what all he's done with them. So they brought in the ark, and they set it up. Can you see Moses as he is now taking over as the job manager, if you will, and he's telling them, be careful with that. Move that in there. Move this over here. Put this over there. Erect this here. Make sure that's nice and straight. Make sure it's taut. Pull those lines tight. Make sure that those pegs are in good. In my mind's eye, I can see Moses doing every bit of this. And then when it's all put together, you see Moses telling them, says, leave, you're finished now. Leave. And when all of the workmen have left, all the artisans have left, even Bezalel has left, there he stands in the middle of the courtyard by himself. Do you see him turn and look at everything? Do you see him as he heads toward the holy place, rubbing his hand on the altar, getting to the laver and maybe dipping his hand and letting the water fall through his fingertips, going through the curtain into the holy place? Then maybe he looks at the table of showbread. He looks over here at the lamp, at the lamp. He looks at the incense table. Maybe he even goes and smells the incense. He looks at the veil, the curtain that separates the holy place from the Holy of Holies. And he goes inside. And he looks at that beautiful golden ark. And he looks at those cherubim and the mercy seat. Do you see him saying prayers and touching the mercy seat? Then standing up and lowering his eyes upward and seeing the cherubim that are embroidered on the ceiling. Taking a deep breath, knowing this is the last time that he will stand where he is standing. And going out. Why could he do that? We know that if you handled, if you touched, if you were where you weren't supposed to be inside that tabernacle, God would strike you down. You disobedient person. And you would die. Why was Moses spared? Yes, that's right, because God had not come in to live there yet. It had not been sanctioned. It had not been anointed yet. God had not taken up residence yet. It was not structured as finished until Moses said it was finished and ready for God to come. Everything was made just as the Lord had commanded Moses. You'll see that again in verse 32 of chapter 40. And then in chapter 34, the glory of the Lord came down. Chapter 40, verse 34. And then the cloud, that's the glory of God, covered the tabernacle of meeting. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because the cloud rested above it. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in their journeys. But when the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. In other words, they moved at God's desire and they followed him, the Lord. They didn't make the rules. They didn't make the decision on which direction to move. They simply followed God. That's what he wants of us now, is to just follow him. Have faith in him, trust in him, and just follow him. In verse 38, for the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their many journeys. Okay, this is the first time Israel is referred to as the house of Israel. This means family, the family of Israel. Worship brings intimacy with God. We become a family. To all my brothers and sisters in Christ, we're family. So this concludes our study of Exodus, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you gained some insight about what a wonderful God you serve. Thank you.